I came, I'll put it this way, I was in Biloxi, Mississippi, and getting ready to go overseas as a B-17 engineer. And I was on the train, get ready to come here, knowing I was coming here. And MP came on and said, you got another set of orders. I figured I'd have done something bad, but I didn't. So I went in there and talked to the guy. And he said, you got another set of orders. And he gave it to me, and it was a telephone number, Knoxville, Tennessee. I said, what kind of orders are those? He says, get on a train. I got on a train and drove day and night and got off in Knoxville, called up this number, and the GI shows up in a beat-up old Chevy, and I get in it with all my junk, did a bag, and it seems like we drove over and drove and drove, and then we went up over a hill and through a guard gate and looked down the hill. It looked like I was in daylight, Oak Ridge. And that was kind of interesting. So that was my first introduction to it. And they drove me up and left me off at F Barracks. Well, they said, you got a bunk in there. So I went and found a first bunk right in the front. The guy in the bottom, no, on the top, Joe DiLorenzo was up there. And so that, he was asleep, you know, and it was 6 o'clock and I'm using a whistle or something, and you get up as a GI. So I saw my uniform was okay. I got out and stand in front of the barracks, nobody. And I looked down, I saw a building. I said, oh, it looks like a place to eat, you know. And that's a mess hall. I saw a couple of GIs going, but I saw a couple of you know, regular people going in there. Well, I went down, to make a story, and got in there, and just a few people got in the line, and they had the best food line up, you know. I hadn't seen, I put the tray, I'm putting everything on. You know, in a mess hall, you never pay for it. I got down there, I said, $1. All I had in my pocket was $1. I gave it. I said, what kind of a place is this? So I saw that short hall I walked up to, and I saw the officer. It was a GI, actually. He said, oh, you get $90 a month. I said, well, I don't know how I got the money, but at some time, I said, well, you're supposed to get on the first bus and go head to K-25. So one of these buses, and I get on, all sorts of people on it. And we drove and drove and drove. And then we came to the guard gate and came into K-25. Now, if you look at they call it the U. If you lay it down and figure on this end, that's where I was. And I got up there, I didn't know anybody. And they said, well, you better go over to the engineering officer. So I went down and they showed me a wooden building. I got in there, an engineering officer. And I was introduced to a guy by the name of Jack Mahoney. And he was over instrument engineering. He said, well, you're going to be a junior cadet engineer. That's like being a second grade cowboy, I guess. But anyhow, they showed me how I went back and went into last end, which is it's in the withdrawal area. There's no uranium supposed to be in that area. And I met 3 GIs and a civilian. The head of it over us was Will Morton. Then there was Lenny Troy, myself, And Tom, and I can't remember his last name, but that was the group that was up there doing work. And I said, well, what are we working on? Well, you're working on a space recorder. What's a space recorder? Well, anyhow, there was kind of a square building, small, and they had a door, and it was heated on the inside. And inside of it was a cylinder, and if you look on the top of a telephone pole and see a transformer, it was like that shape. Only it was either nickel-plated or a Manel alloy, you know. So that was the unit, and it took flows of gas into it from the withdrawal area, and it had two pumps, and they're called B4 pumps. And if you go in the end of this building in the first door, you can see one. But we needed the two pumps, and at that time, when I was going there, I had a 40 Ford convertible. So I said, let's go over to the maintenance or the warehouse. So we drove over the warehouse, and it was opposite 1401 building. And we drove in there, and we went in the back and we found the two B4 pumps. One of the guys learned then, I guess, how to use a forklift. So we got the forklift and drove it out the back. I said, you're not going to put those things in the back of mine. He said, well, they got a big piece of plywood and put it in. And we were able to lower them and manhandle the two of them on the back seat of the convertible. And then we drove that back over to you and got some maintenance people to take them out. And they took them up on the operating floor, took them down the end where we were working. Well, that we installed them on mounts inside. And I did all the silver soldering, the copper tubing on it, because I was the only one who knew how to do it. But I graduated from the Casey Jones School of Aeronautics in Newark. Spent 2 years there. And you learn to be a craftsman to work at the old airplanes. And so we got all those together. And then we got the electrical. I didn't know anything about that, but Will Morton did. And they connected it up. It's like, well, inside it, if you look out inside of an incandescent lamp and see the filaments in it, well, it looked like that. It had an electrode in the middle of it. It had a very high potential on it. And then you took the gas that wasn't supposed to have any uranium in it and flow it through, and the pump circulated at the B4 pumps. And so if they hit that, if a particle of uranium got in there, it would be shoved over to one of the filaments, give off an EMF, and go out to a preamp and to an amplifier to a recorder. That's simple. But the biggest problem in doing the calculations, and I could do them, but Tom could. He almost graduated from Yale. And so if you take a slide rule, you can only use it to about 2 places. And we were screwed. That's the only thing we had. So I went down the hall and I looked and I saw an electrical calculator, a Marchand. And I went and picked it up and said, maintenance, and walked out with it. I walked all the way down the end and carried it and put it on. And we had it for 2 weeks. But we were able to calculate out to about the eight points at past the decimal. And damn if it didn't work. I mean, we actually showed that if something did come in, it showed it. And it was a great success. It ended up, they ran cables all the way to the control house so that they didn't have to come up to look at it. They could see in the control room what was going on, if any uranium was getting out. But at that time, the only enrichment was about 93%, which ain't much. But the funny part about it, Clark Center and Dr. Felbeck said, you let us have the plant for a year and let us run it. We'll pull it up to at least 93%. And damn, in a year they did. That closed Y-12 down because they had the calutrons that did it. And, well, that's another subject. Let somebody else tell you about that. So it was a success. But there are other things in Kin 25 that really amazed me. Every one of the stations, there were numbers like the ones we were next to, I think was 3038 or something. And they had a glass, trying to get the names of them. But anyhow, they used them in laboratories in order to separate elements. And they made a glass. And each one of the stations had one in. And I didn't really realize what they were for, but I learned later on, if one of the seals on the pump leaked, if it started to go up, it would go into mass spectrometer and indicate you had a leak. Well, that's damn bad, because if you have to take the seals out, it close off the pump. And if you have that, alarm went off and they told you where it was. You got on a bicycle and you went like mad and you found it, and then you turned because they were all mechanical. Later on, they did make them electrical. And I think before I left, but I thought those things were absolutely amazing and they're, because they were mercury in them. And they had, the mercury was kept cold with dry ice slush. And I just didn't, you might see one in a college laboratory, but to see them row all the way around the plant, to me was kind of amazing. Now let's see, what else can I talk about? Oh, the other thing is that I got involved in. The valves in K25 were actually gate valves. They would, you have a pipe, the gates came out and stopped it. See, and then you had a wheel that went down the part and made them go in and out. Well, the seals in those things were made of either Teflon or fluorethane. Those are plastics that could stand UF6, uranium hexafluoride. But the amazing were the things that they leaked. They got hot, and you had to take the pumps out and put new seals in. So I had changed and went with development, was working over in what they call a 1401 building and in the basement. And I was working in one of the stands where they condition the converters. And they said, see if you can develop a seal. Well, I said, they're using plastic. Why don't they use metal? And I said, well, these guys didn't know anything about aircraft, but I knew there was three kinds, 17ST, 24ST, and 52-100. The 52 with aluminum that could be welded. And when I worked for Republic Aircraft, I saw that stuff being welded. I said, you know, that must be pretty soft. So I went to my buddies in the machine shop and made a rough sketch of what I wanted. And I had to go to stores and have them purchase this material. And I got some material roughly about 1/16 of an inch thick, maybe a little thicker. But I said, well, if I could get that and have a seal and have two surfaces go like this, that may seal. Now we had to really make a good seal. So they came back and they gave me a little ring all made up. And so they took the surfaces and machined them so that they had the surface like this. Well, we put it in there and we closed it down. And then we had one of these little 100 pumps. And they'll pump down to 15 microns. That's pretty low. That's as good as a little mechanical pump would do. But that was good enough to test. So I had that on there, and I closed down it good and tight, turned on the pump, and it was pumped down to 15 microns. And I just watched it and didn't move. So I said, I'm going to leave it overnight. So I went home, came back, and it was still down to 15 microns. So that solved it. So they started getting great big plates and making rings down. But the funny part about it, when I took apart the ring and I cut it in half and looked at the edge, I made an error on the drawing. And what I did, instead of these things coming together like this, they came like this. And what that did, it made a long surface. That's what made the seal. I didn't know how to draw. I wasn't a draftsman or anything, but I just, And so they started doing those, and they ended up being put in all the valves in the plant. But that was kind of interesting. But one of the GIs that I thought was the most marvelous engineer was, what was his name? Victor Hovis. He graduated from Georgia Tech. And they gave me a problem, which I can't talk about, which it took me a long while to do, and I finally got it done. But he was I was checking the flow in a tube and trying to find a cut through the barrier. And I found it, but it took me about 6 months to do. And I said, look, I've got these numbers, Vic, on the flow, and I know what they've done. I can tell you what they are and where it's happening. He says, well, it's in the Mechanical Engineering Handbook. So he opens up, and there's an equation. V equals the square root of 2GH. And that did it. And so we used that. The numbers came out. And Cal Moore, he didn't trust him. He couldn't see how I could do that. But if I showed you how it was done, it was kind of amazing. And it was Victor Hovis, he was the one that, but the other thing is, on the pumps in the K-25, the biggest problem was the seals. And that the seal itself, at that time, was secret. But the thing that really was secret was it wasn't on first, but Victor Hovis designed where this pretty good surface he was able to make a pattern on that would keep the stuff closer to the staff and not come out. And so he got, it was my job to take the original, it was a round disc about that size, out of 52-100 steel, and we put it in a gas furnace. We had a reducing furnace, and it was so high temperature, you couldn't have a thermocouple that would stand up, it would melt in there. So you had to use videos to look at it. And I got so I could look at it and know exactly when it was at that temperature. And when it wasn't, you open up the furnace, because you had to be sure it's closed off, because it was being fed by hydrogen. And you went in and take it off and put it in an old bath that went back and forth, and then that oil bath, that was the first cooling of it. And then after that got done and we could take it out, we put it in a dry ice bath. And that made it the hardness, I forgot the temperature, it's like a 56 hardness. The hardness almost of a file. And those seals went into the seal room where women hand lapped them, flipped them, hand lapped them, until you can put an optical flat on top of it and see it within 1 helium light line of flatness. That is awfully flat. And but that was amazed Vic, and he took off and went to Detroit, and one of the machine shops up there to see how they worked surfaces. And they had the oil surface, the pan and so forth on your car, and they had them on big vertical boring wheels that had an abrasive on them. And they sat in there, and they were standing still, and that was going around underneath them, and damn, it flattened them pretty good. So he came back and got a boring mill back there in the retubing area, and he made a frame with holes to hold the discs, and he put the compound on them, and then ran that going around. The discs were standing still, and you take them out and flip them, and that worked. And they saved a fortune, because just to think we must have 15 to 20 women in there, sitting in there, grinding and flipping, grinding and flipping. And he was the guy that invented it. And he did so damn many other things. I mean, he was good. What else do you want to talk about?
Well, I was curious if you could tell me a little bit more why you were recruited to join the Manhattan Project in the first place.
You don't want to know. Well, my father and Dr. Feldbeck were down in the basement in our home in Baldwin, Long Island. And they had a big drawing table, half as big as this. And my father had drawings. He could draw a whole ammonia plant, complete details, and you could build from it. And they were talking about it, and I heard things I wasn't supposed to hear. So they saw me. I went down the stairs. And did you hear what we were talking about? I said, yeah. I said, I want to tell you something. You keep your mouth shut. I don't want you to say a word. Don't you talk to anybody that you saw us down here or what we were doing. It's almost like they're going to kill me. But I mean, they swore to, I realized how serious they were. You see, my father designed the heat exchangers that went in K-25. But, when I was getting they put me back into cadets. I didn't want to go. And they were going to make me be a B-29 engineer. I'd already spent 400 hours on engineering a B-17, and I didn't want to go back. I said, send me overseas. So I was on another one of these deals where I got pulled off the train, you know. But the funny part about it, my wife came down and stayed with me for a while, and we were in a Waffle House, and we were eating waffles, and I was reading newspaper, and it said about the bomb dropped, and it named Oak Ridge. I said, Dolores, I'm free. I can talk now. But then that's when I got ended up on the train with another set of orders, ended up in Knoxville with a telephone number and ended up there.
One question I had is, could you tell me a little bit more about who Dr. George Felbeck was?
Oh, Dr. Felbeck? Dr. Felbeck was president of Union Carbide. I don't know whether he got his letter in here. And he was a brilliant man. And he told my father, I'm not going to go any place in Union Carbide until I'm a PhD. Well, my father said, well, quit and go to school. He said, I've got a family. He said, well, you got enough money, you most likely can last long enough. Well, they got in a car and drove all the way across the United States and to Caltech. And he got his PhD there. And then he came back and became president of Union Carbide. And the worst part about it, did I tell you about his daughter? He had a stepdaughter because his little girl, he had a baby that died while my wife was with. And he was going to go to see her. She was in Australia. She had married. And so he hated airplanes, wouldn't go near her. But he got in the airplane, and I think it was at Kennedy and they just got off the ground and the airplane crashed and he got killed. I thought everyone knew about that. Anything else you want to know?
So jumping back a little bit, could you tell me a little bit about where you were born and about your childhood?
I was born in Hartford, Connecticut, in a house, and we lived on the top of an unfinished, an old farmhouse, and my father was working for Whitlock Coil and Pipe Company, and at that time. And when I was born, World War I was stopping, and they were making torpedo tubes at that time. But I grew up in Brooklyn. That was fantastic. Anything else I got?
So you grew up in Brooklyn, and then you were in the Army Air Corps, is that right?
Well, what happened? I worked in Glen L. Martin on the B-26, PBM-1 and the Mars, and I was an inspector. And I lived in an unfinished attic in no heat, and I got tired of that kind of stuff, and I said, I'm going home. I stayed there almost a year, I guess. So I went home, and my mother looked at me, you're going to work. I said, oh, so I drove out to Republic Aircraft and became an inspector there. And I had a small parts crib, and I had 5 men working for me. And I worked for there, and I could see that I was young enough that they're going to nab me for the service. So I got on a train and went to New York and went to down at the lower part of Manhattan, a building, and I had a big auditorium, and there was about 300 people in there taking a test, and I was in there taking a test with them to get into service. I wanted to be a pilot. So that was when, and then they called my name out, and I got up. I figured I flunked the test, and I had my coat on and getting out. And the sergeant comes out and says, "Is there James S. Cole here?" I said, "Here." And he says, "Come in." I found out I passed, and from then on, I said, "Well, when do I get my uniform?" Because we went over to Governor's Island, got all our shots and everything, and signed and signed, you know, and oh, we'll call you. I had to go home and go back to work, so I ended up teaching school in Freeport, Long Island, aircraft construction and how to read a micrometer and how to rivet. And I was there for about 6 months, and then I got my orders to go. Then I went with my parents to New York, got on a train, and went 3 days and 3 nights and ended up in San Antonio. And I was A barracks. And in those days they had upper and lower classmen. And that's really what you call chicken. And I hated that, but I got pneumonia, so I was in 43K, and when I came back, they put me in 43J, and I finished graduate. You got the year of physics in 1 month. You know, I had geometry, and I had, you know, some math in aircraft school, but that kind of tough to get through that test. And then we got in a train and we went to it wasn't Enid. I'll think about it, but we went to primary flying, and I flew PT-19s for a little over 100 hours, and graduated from there and went on to PT-15s, and that's where I met my wife. That was kind of funny. I was in the barracks, and I came out and I tripped, and my hands went out like that, and it was gravel, and I tore up my hands. So I went to the dispensary and they bandaged him up. And so I went to USO that night, and I got there and there was a dance going on. There was a little girl dancing there. And I went over and said, "Can I dance?" She said, "Well, how can you dance? Your hands are all..." I said, "I got a thumb." So she grabbed my thumb. 22 days later, I married her. But there's a lot of stuff goes on. I had wonderful times at Y-12, though. God, the things I did there, you wouldn't believe.
So let's move into that. So you were friends with Jack Case, who was the plant manager. Is that right?
Jack Case was the plant manager of Y-12, and he was a machinist himself, and I believe his original place, that he was someplace in St. Louis where they were manufacturing stuff for armament. But he was an excellent machinist and is up to him right. And when I got there, they made a coordinator out of me, and there were 5 of us. I can't remember them, half of them. But I was assigned a weapon. I didn't know what they were. And they said, "That one's yours." Well, I had to learn all about them, which I learned enough about that one, and its assembly and so forth. But we made two kinds. One, that was to prove to the government we could make that kind, and I can't tell you what they were. But that was quite interesting. Another thing I did is, while I was there, they said, one of the guys from X-10 said, how'd you like to go over and go up in the towers? Well, there's 2 towers that go up, and it had an outfit. They could hang up a reactor, and that reactor, the power, they could put it on in front of what they figured if you had a reactor in an airplane, could it stand it? But we got there, see, Tommy Weber, myself, Bill Forrester, and one of the superintendents. And we got there and got in an elevator and went 300 feet high on this thing. And you look out, you know, if you want to see it, just drive out to the dam out here and you can see it. And we swung out, we went across the middle of it. But the other guys, they were holding on. But because you know, with use of heights and use of flying, it didn't bother me. But that was something to go up top of those things. But you ought to go out and look at it if you got a chance. It's beautiful. Anything else you got? Oh, this interesting thing. We were working with tungsten at Y12, and I worked for a brilliant engineer, Trygve Meyer. He's still alive. He lives in Knoxville. And one time before Christmas, Dr. Bloor came from the Army and said, he had some drawings. He said, can you make this for us? And it was out of tungsten. Well, Trygve got Glenn Northcott out of development. I was a metal specialist. And instead of using the straight tungsten, they concocted their own, which wasn't legal, but they did it anyhow. And then that stuff went into furnaces, and the very high furnaces, until we got little tongues came out at the end of them. And then when they cooled off, we were able to machine them. And we machined them to the shape of the penetrator that was going into the guns that were in the tanks. But we forgot about it. We sent them to them. We sent 10 of them. And I was sitting in the office one time, and I could look across at Trygve. He has a phone to us here, and he said, sit down. And he said, I'm talking to a general. And he was pissed off. Shoot the language. But anyhow, what had happened? They used it, and it went through all the test armor they had. The other ones they had broke up. This went, whoa. And if I told you the steel, the first plate was this thick, the second plate was this thick, the next plate was about this thick, and they were all at a slant, and they were welded together with space in between them. And we had a thing called it was a long gun. It was so long that it bent. And so we put an A-frame on it, and we could adjust it and make it perfectly straight. And they pointed that at the it actually went through a building and came out and hit these targets. And we were sitting and we heard go boom. We knew it went. And then I went all out and looked at that, and I believed it. The first hole was like that, and the last hole was about that big, and it went through all of them. And they wanted to know what the hell we did to that. So I guess those were the ones that were used in Iraq. Of course, we also made uranium ones. They were mean. They were made of a U3/4 titanium, I think. Yeah. And they were made, and when they went through a tank, I mean, it burned up there was nothing inside. That burned up everybody, people and all. There's just dust. It was it was something else.
I had one other question about Jack Case. What was he like as a person?
Neat. You had to know him, though, because when we came in, we had to go in before him. We sat in a great big cushion. We all sat down, and he pumped us. At that time, he was superintendent. And then he would go out in the shops, and he knew everything that went on. So, you know, the foreman on the shops, they couldn't put anything over on him. He knew what was going on. But where he came, got his forte, when you machined some of the parts we had, and we had it in one place, they were so, finishes were so good, and the tolerances so close. The American lathes we had in the basement of H2, they weren't good enough. I mean, the tailstock and the spindle would go together, and you put a part and you couldn't machine it accurately. So he got a bunch of the millwrights out from 9201-1, and they came in and they blued them up, and they with grinding compounds, and they worked those beds so that you could take a spindle here and a tool in this end and put it was a tenth of a thousandth. And that's what did it. And Jack Case is responsible for that. But and we had another thing. We were machining a special part. And in order to machine it, you had to machine it off a template. And you stuck it in the lathe, and the little follower followed the temp and would machine the shape of the template. Well, O.C. Willard, my buddy, he was operating the lathe, and he was getting wild with it, and he had the stop into the side of the template, which was plastic, and put a dent into it. And he figured he was fired. Jack Case came to look at it, because it made a special part. I mean, in some of the weapons we were building at that time. So he took the template. I don't know what happened to it, but all of a sudden it came back and it looked perfect. It was in. And after Jack retired and we're back at the Elks, biting a little bit. And I said, Jack, when did they get that template? He said, I went up to the plastic shop. He said, you guys keep telling me how good plastic you got. I want you to put some plastic that's exactly as hard as that plastic on that, in that hole. So they did it. And then he took it and put it in a vise someplace. And using his hands and tools, made that perfect surface. And we never knew it. And it made the parts perfectly. But Nobody knew it until I knew it. We were all on the back of the Elks Lodge. I'm the oldest member in that lodge. I go in once in a while. I'm a member of the Eagles too. That burned down, we're just rebuilding it. What else would you like to know?
So I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about who Clark Center was and how you knew him.
Oh, Clark Center came with Felbeck to our house in Brooklyn, 104 Woodruff Avenue. That's where those little engines were made. And on New Year's, Tiny, it was his wife, Felbeck and Betty, and my mother and father, and I don't know who the other couple was, but they would on New Year's would tear up the rugs and go and dance. And I can remember I lived up in the attic in the house that my mother was born in, and and that's I knew that's how they all knew to each other long before the K-25 was that thing, of course. K-25 was built in 2 years, and it's absolutely amazing. But that's when I saw the drawings with some of it just on my father's drawing table, and that's when I got shut up. But I knew them, and then they moved to Rockville Center, and we moved to Baldwin. We came back and forth. We were good friends. I don't know where the hell Center went. But I think Clark Center put itself through school, I think Michigan, playing the trumpet. He worked for Union Carbide in Virginia, not Virginia, West Virginia. And he worked, he was in the manufacturing building looking out, and one of the buildings was on fire. And he went out and went inside and turned off the valves in it that kept it from blowing up. And that made him, because some of the superintendents in the plant saw it, and they figured he was a pretty good guy, and so he came to, I guess Felbeck brought him down to K-25. My father came there one time. It was kind of interesting. And I got a call to the office in Clark Center, and I looked, that's my old man. He said, I think he said, get Brantram's car. He gave me the key. He said, take your father around, show him the plant. So I showed him every damn classified thing in the place because I knew he could see it. But he didn't have a badge or anything, and I took them all around. But another thing that happened there, one of the GIs, we were checking the water in the Clinch River, and it had a high level of copper, and we couldn't figure out where the devil come. And one of the GIs, hold on, he decided that if they could do something to the water, that maybe we could do something. So he found something and messing around. I think it was Calgon, which is an ordinary soap that's used in washing. And he put it in the water, and that put a very tiny film on the copper tubing in the heat exchangers, and the copper didn't come off anymore, and that stopped it. And that's another GI that did, and Victor Hovis, There was no, I never thought there was any more brilliant than him.
I had one other question for you. When you're thinking about that, so Clark Center was the top manager at K-25. Was that right? So what did he do, and did you work with him regularly?
No, he just was over. He'd come around once in a while. Had a terrific memory. He could remember every guy he met. We didn't ever see him much because he was top dog. And we never saw Felbert much because he was all over for Union Carbide.
And one other question I had was, could you tell me what buildings you worked in at Y-12?
I worked in, let's see, Beta 2, Beta 4, 9201-1. Oh, that was a funny thing that happened there. I got a call, because I got into work for others and got out of the weapon stuff. I was more interested in it. And we got a call from General Electric if we could fix a part for them, and we didn't know. So Jack Case called me and said, take it on. And this thing comes in. It was about that round. It was about that. And what it was a steam splitter that came from a nuclear plant. And when the steam came in, it split and went to an engine, I guess to a motor here, and this went to this side. And the surface had got bunged up, and they didn't tell me how. But they sent an engineer down with him, and he wasn't cleared. So they had to clear him and everywhere I went, he had to go with me. So I figured, I saw this thing, I said, well, ship it up to Beta 4. Beta 4 had some large vertical boring mills, and they had plates that were 6 feet in diameter. And I was able to put the face of one with the face sticking up in the other so we could look at it. But if we machined on it, we'd make it small, and we couldn't do that. So I thought, well, if I could weld on it and build up a surface, that might work. But then I didn't know what the material was. So we dug some out, and I sent it to the laboratory. And I sent it over to -1, and they found me a welder that was qualified to weld on that steel. So he got on a chair, and while this thing was rotating very, very slow, he used a heliarc, and he welded a beautiful bead all around both surfaces. Then we took the machine and actually machined across that surface and moved a perfect surface. Well, I had it inspected and so forth. And I called this guy up, and they sent this engineer back. And I said, did you want to inspect it? No, it looks fine, send it. And I never heard anything more about it. It left. But that was some of the things that we got into. But that was an interesting one. Then we made a thing, let's see, the 9201 was the main machine shop. And Tommy Weber ended up over that and took primarily what Jack Case used to do. He's still alive, and he lives in Knoxville. One heck of a nice guy. And I don't know, but that was a tremendous machine shop. You know, all the uranium was welded in carbon. So you had big molds about this wide and this high, and you put it in, And the furnace is like a, how can I describe it? Like a microwave furnace. And this carbon, it was in this microwave, and then we melted the uranium. And when we took it out, it'd be in a billet. And then we could take it and put a rolling mill, which is down in the basement, and roll it down into a sheet. We could roll it down, well, with 2 mills, with the big mill, we could roll it down easy to 1/4 of an inch. But the thing that we put in there, I mean, uranium, this thing and this, just think how many tons that weighed. Well, yeah, there was a lot of things we did. But one thing that we did, the armor on tanks is not a plate of steel. Part of it is, but then it's got fins all the way around, covered over, so that if a penetrator hits it and hits a high density material, it shifts off to the side and becomes a dud. So they wanted some tungsten plate. We didn't have any rolled tungsten plate. So what I did, I had cast some little discs about this big and about this round, and put them in a lathe and machined them until they were, a 1/16 of an inch thick. And I made about, I don't know, 10 of them. I just put them in a paper bag and stuck them in my pocket and walked out the gate. Trigger fire. Where the hell did you get that? But I guess I was a pretty sneaky guy. but evidently that's, I don't know what materials they're using now, but I know they were using aluminum once, and I just told them that I went to a meeting and to one of the universities, they had a bunch of them, and I just told them it wasn't any good. They wouldn't believe me. And they used it, and it wasn't any good. Yeah.
One other question I had for you was, if you could tell me a little bit about what the Special Engineer Detachment was and why that was important in the Manhattan Project.
The Special Engineering Chapter? Well, they were looking for people. Couldn't get any engineers, and everybody else was either in the service. And so what they looked all over the United States, and they found out that if they could get a guy that had 2 years experience and still in school, they could get him in the engineer. And if you look in this book, you can see right on the end, you can, if I just open up a page, you can see this one was at St. Vincent, this was in Lawrence Institute, this was in Indiana University. Oh, this was in North Carolina. All these different schools, the guys had some mechanical experience. And if you look in that book, there's over 1,500 of them. And they were the guys you don't know. They operated the plant. They were the ones that were doing it. Sure, we had a lot of civilians, but those were they were the ones. I mean, we did funny things like they told me to go down, find out. General Electric had made an instrument to check the plant air, the instrument air, because they were worried of being contaminated. So they had this unit in there, and it was always going bad. And they said, I didn't know about that damn thing. And I went down and looked at it, and I saw it had a mirror about that big, which the air was going on. I looked at it, and I didn't see anything. And then I was out one time, I think it was sunlight came in the room, because it was right on the outside, and it looked iridescent. So I took some paper or cotton or something, and I wiped it all off and took it to the laboratory. And they analyzed it was engine oil. And the pumps that pumped the air, you couldn't stop it. So what you had to do was periodically go in and clean that mirror. And that's all you had to do. That was one of the funny things we did. Yeah, I played on a basketball team with K-25. I played against Carson Newman. I played against the University of Maryland. I wasn't very good. I was too little. But it was fun.
How did you get involved with the basketball team?
Well, I was playing. I think I was in one of these gyms, and I was playing. And I knew enough about it. And then when I was in Brooklyn, I played a lot of basketball in church. And then I played 2 or 3 times a week. I love to play. So they gave me a blue uniform, and I didn't play much because everybody was so big. My wife was with me when we were watching Carson Newman play, and I had put that way of the ball and faked the guy. And to stop it, he put his fist out and hit me in the nose and made a dent in it. And made my wife mad. She was going after him with an umbrella. Those are the... Oh, yeah, we did a lot of crazy things. Yep, it was something. I remember one time I was driving my little Ford, and the generator was getting screwed up. So I got it in the kitchen. I lived on 111 Esper Road. I took it out of the car and I put it in the kitchen, and I took out the brushes and they were worn. Well, where are you going to get brushes for a 40 Ford convertible? You know, in the middle of Tennessee, they didn't even know what the car looked like. So I found that a little place did some automobile maintenance, had some brushes. So I took the brushes and with a pair of pliers, I shaped one until it fitted in and connected in. And when I sold they were still in, they worked fine. But those are the things we had happen to us.
You just kind of had to make do. It sounds like sometimes.
Oh, we always were doing that. We had a garden. I knew what a tree was, but in Brooklyn, I didn't know what a damn garden. But that was fun. We were flying in 17 at night. The pilot was 20 years old, the co-pilot was 19, and the engineer was 22, that was me. And we had been out doing flying, and we came in, we let the gear down. And the guy on the left-hand side said, I got a gear, or I got a wheel. And the one on the right side, I don't. So none of them knew about it, but they didn't know about the mechanics of the airplane. They could fly one. They knew how the instruments worked and how all the flying instruments worked. And so went open the door and went out to the Bombay and put my foot on the center, and the door, Bombay door, got it over. And up here was a clamp, and I pulled out, we had a crank. And what I did, I put it in a hole, and 250 turns, I turned that wheel down, and then I took it out, put it back in, and the pilots came back and flew back over the tower and asked if the wheel was down. And the guy said, "It appears to be down." But we landed, and when I got in, I had to report that we had the landing gear motor was burned up, so it had to be removed, put in there. The other thing that's kind of interesting went on those things. 3 o'clock in the morning, I got called up and said, "Your airplane's ready." I said, "That's nice. What's ready for?" "It's ready for you to inspect it, to get it back in the line." I got in a tug with a guy, and I went down to the maintenance building. There's my plane, H-95, sitting out in the middle. And he said, "Go and inspect it." Well, I go in the back door, climb up, get in the pilot's seat, flick on the electric switch, and put the closed and cracked apart and put the mixture control in full rich, and push the starter, and boom, I've got number 2 engine started. I started that one first. And the reason you start that one on first, the hydraulic pump is in there, and the only hydraulic system in that airplane is in the brakes. Well, you didn't want to have a damn engine going, without your brakes on, and that's how I put that one on. And then you start all 4 engines, and then you've got to check the mixture control, you've got to check all the instruments, see that they're all operating correctly, check the change of prop pitch, and then when it's all done, I had a piece of paper in my lap, and I had to sign it off, buck private. I was a K-25 1 month, and I ended up as a T5. Everybody up there was either a master sergeant or better. They deserved it. The other thing kind of interested, I had a weapon that I was in charge of, and a ship to Rocky Flats. And there was a mountain. We drove up there, and all the parts for that weapon had to go down a hole, which was about this big, and it had 2 levels, and it was on the end of a cable of a crane that was a back away, and that lowered you down. The only light you had was a miner's lamp, and you went down 700 feet in the ground, and you get out there, and there's the place where you're going to assemble the weapon. And that was quite an experience. The funny part is, as you go up the altitude, they had to go real fast because the air became lean. There wasn't enough oxygen really to run the engines good. So we'd go wide open up that hill to get up to the top. But that was fun to do. I don't know whether it was fun or not, but we were 100 miles out of Las Vegas. We went that 100 miles every night to play the machines.
So were you stationed in Nevada for a time?
No, I wasn't stationed. We just went there to do that and then went home. We flew out, did it. But most of the engineers and physicists on the bombs came out of New Mexico. They were pretty nice guys. There was one guy that came out, had a partial wooden leg. He was weird, but a nice guy. He'd be sitting at the desk talking to me, and he'd go take a tack and tack his stocking to his, when one of the girls would come in. What are you doing? but he was, Jack Case liked him. He brought a lot of work out to the plant, work for others. And he was interested in having a blue hound. Well, one of the guys in the basement raised him, and he had one. So Jack they made a crate over the carpenter shop and over the maintenance building, and they had the crate. And this guy comes in with the dog and puts it in the crate, and they took it in the airplane. He took it back to Livermore. That's kind of a weird one, isn't it?
About the exhibit in New York, was there anything you wanted to say about that?
Well, when we got the job to do, some of the engineering on the shape and so forth came in, but to finish and get the materials and get the pump and put it together, we did that in the basement of 1401. And we got it to run in there. The biggest problem was getting the balls to weigh right and all the same. And so we used hypodermic needles and murium red oil, about a specific gravity of 1, which is about the same as water. And we just put them in there until we get them and weigh them until they were right. And that, we were able to get some to go through and some not to get through. But, you know, we thought it was going all of a sudden when they told us to get down there and exhibit it. Well, the worst part of that place, we ended up exhibiting everything. And X10 didn't have any people there, but they had some hands that worked when you could work with contamination inside a glass place. So we learned how to use them and exhibit it when people came in. And the other thing that bothered us was we had a little movie with a tape in it, which was always breaking. So we had to learn how to play that. And all the visitors were coming in one day and the damn thing was broken. We were in there working like mad to get that thing done, you know. And we did just in time, we got it working so they could see the picture. But I guess we had to go up there a couple of weeks. My wife wasn't too happy. But it was, you know where Madison Avenue was. I worked with my uncle who was in World War I. He was an artist and had a business up there, and I did the errands for him when I was a kid. He gave me $10 a month or something like that. Money was, you could get anything for $1. Mm-hmm. I mean, for $1 you could get a loaf of bread and a gallon of milk. Oh, you got anything else you want?
So one question I want to know more about was sort of what your thoughts are on the Manhattan Project and its legacy, and if your thoughts about that have changed at all over the years.
I think it was maybe one of the marvels of the world. When you figure that thing is almost a mile long all the way around, And it was made in 2 years. And it stopped the World War II. I mean, when they dropped those bombs on the Japanese, that was it. It was an amazing, amazing thing. And some of the things that were, the developing of the special materials that separated it. I mean, some of the machinery that did that. Now, Gordon Fee was over that building. You might be able to pump in on that, but I don't know how much it'll say. I won't. It's highly classified. But the thing that was interesting, another thing that Victor did, I don't know whether they talked about it, when they were going to use centrifuges to separate the U-25 and U-26, they're going to try to do it with centrifuges. Well, the Wilburs made a front centrifuge. Well, they gave it to Victor to check him. Well, he checked them, and they wouldn't run a half a day, then they'd tear up. But we wanted them to run and run and run. So he took them out. He went into the machine shop, and he talked to Clayton, Ben Clayton, the foreman, and he found this old balancing machine. So they put the rotors in the balancing machine and cut the fins so that when it twirled, it was in perfect balance. Then he put them back into the Wilburs with new bearings and started to run. And it ran and ran and ran. And he left overnight and came back in the morning and they were still running. And that was the proof of that. So he was one of the granddaddies, I always felt, because, the centrifuge is the thing now. Of course, when we ran the K-25 up to 93%, that closed up Y-12. And that was loaded with, the big problem there is we had to give the government back their silver. See, all the rods and the metal and the stuff were made out of it. And we had to take it to the foundry and melted it back into bricks instead of, that's before they could take it to wherever they keep the stuff. But that guy was, Victor was really quite a guy. There's a picture of him in there. But I felt he was one of the top dogs. The instrument shop we had was excellent. When you figure they had to take care of all those glass equipment that was up in the foundry. Think of something else?
Do you remember where you were when you heard about the atomic bombings?
I knew it was a bomb when my wife and I were eating in a Waffle Hut in Biloxi, Mississippi. That's when I knew I was released. But then I knew pretty much about it. But they were brilliant, brilliant people to do this. And certainly, where did they get all the mechanics and the people that could put that together? They had to find a place for them to live. So they had hutments they lived. I had a little stove that not only heat the water for them so they could take a shower, you cooked in it, you did everything. And they was something. And, it was the thing that annoyed me, I guess, more than living up in New England, when I did, I knew that there was a color separation, and I didn't like that. And when I first got in the building, some of the toilets were marked black or white.
What do you remember about the sort of the secrecy and the security at Oak Ridge during the Manhattan Project?
We kept our mouths shut. You didn't talk about it. I mean, if you talked about something you're thinking was slightly, the one you talked to shut you up. Everybody kept it quiet. Yeah. Oh, there's so much happened. Yep.
Well, are there sort of other stories from K-25 or from Y-12 that you'd like to share?
Well, the other thing is we had bicycles. Everybody was stealing your bicycle. I don't know where. I'd go by and somebody could take my bicycle. Heck, I'd snitch somebody else's. Because, you know, if you had to turn a valve, you had to get on the bike and go like mad and turn it, get that sent off. But they did a lot of stuff. Yeah.
And K-25 was so large that you needed bicycles to get around.
Oh, it's like going. It's like going. Well, it's like going around Madison Square Garden. I mean, it's large. I mean, the width was about, that you could walk through was about from there to there, and you walk through. And you could see all the way down. And the little girls sitting in front of the mass spectrometers watching them, they had to be sure the dry ice was there and they were working properly. Yep. But it's amazing that there was that many GIs here, and they, as far as I'm concerned, they didn't get enough. You know, they were really, they did everything. I mean, they did manual work, they did arithmetic, they did mathematics, they did inventing, they did everything. And they were good. And they came all the way from all over the United States. Actually, I enlisted in '42 because it was 6 months I was on the loose, having to make a living. Yeah, I used to, when I was working on a P-47, you'd have to go out, work your overtime, and then you'd have to come early to get on again, because they were so short of people. But I used to drive out down to Jones's, or down to the shore, put a blanket out, sleep on the sand, and go take a nap, get up, come back. Teaching school was fun down there. I learned how to use a micrometer. I had 2 black youngsters. They were the best riveters I ever had. They were so talented. And they were very quick. Because you had to put a lot of rivets in. Now, the B-26 was made up of 4 sections. And it was really a killer when it first came out. It had 2 R-2800 engines, which were 2,000 horsepower apiece. And it would do 300 miles an hour. And coming in on the ground, the wing clamp was so short, they'd hit, speeds of 150 miles an hour on landing. And then when you put the brakes on, you turn them up, and they had accidents. So I know in the future, I don't know when it happened, they increased the area of the wing. But when putting rivets in the, or inspecting the rivets on the Mars, up on that wing, I mean, it's scary looking down. It's so damn high. That was I never did much of that. But the B-26, then they made an amphibian called a PBM-3. They made 1, 2, and 3, but 3 was the final one.
What did you do for recreation in Oak Ridge during the war and after?
Played softball, garden, took the kids to school when they were old enough. We played softball. Dolores and I played tennis. We did a lot of dancing, had good bands come here. But it was very active. The people were active people. They were intelligent, you know. The GIs were a lot of fun. But that was yeah, we had all the useful, and you know, we had our own place. We could shoot pool. We did a lot of fishing. We used to fish and caught stripes and crappie. And the guys we used to catch about 300 pounds of fish and fillet them. And we'd have a feed at K-25 for all the people. We did that. That was fun. My son still fishes. He's got 3 boats. He's got a nice runabout with I think it's got a 25. It's pretty fast. And then it's completely equipped with fish finders and all. And then he's got a smaller one. It's a John boat, but its front is fixed-rate. And he has a 9 horsepower on that. It's got all the equipment on it. They'll go out on a Saturday and catch 10 or 15 fish. He goes out with his son-in-law.
Sounds like he inherited that from you.
Oh yeah. We were out below Melton Hill Dam with Dolores, my son. We had the boat pulled up in the mud bun, and we saw some rippling. It was cold, just before Christmas. I mean, and we were fishing with light tackle, 6-pound test line with lures we made. And when the 3 of us, we took the fish we caught and threw them up in the bank, and they froze. And we took them home, and it filled up a can about that high. And there was a guy in Clinton that said, any fish you got, just bring me. I said, well, come home and get it. He said, don't you ever do that again. He said, we were up 3 o'clock in the morning cleaning fish. I forget his name. But they're still catching stripes just the way I showed them how to do it. But my son-in-law is a good fisherman. I've got 2 stepson and a stepdaughter. They're both nuclear engineers. They graduated from University of Tennessee, and they went 5 years. One of them works on aircraft carriers, the other one works on submarines in Virginia.
So I think we're almost done. It's just, is there anything else you'd like to share?
I don't know. I sit down in the corner and then I start thinking of a lot of stuff. You know, but it was something. But making the seals and the mass spectrometers and making the gaskets to say you can't stop the leaks, those were important. And those were done by GIs. And the seal work was done by a GI. But I think one of the interesting things is the manufacturing of UF6. And that was all done. They tried to do it in vibrating trays, but they only ended up with one tray that would work. I think they took the yellow UO2F2 and they hit it with hydrogen, and that made it, I guess it was UF2, and that was put in a column, we had trouble figuring out how fast to make it go up the column. So we had what they call a Reeves drive, and we had a bicycle sprocket on the bottom of the, and on this side we had another bicycle, and a bicycle chain, and a handle on the Reeves drive so I could change the rates. And then the powder would go up and go into a splitter and drop down in the column where it was hit with fluorine and hydrogen. What could be worse? I mean, and when it burned, it made a red spot on the side of the column. And it turned to UF6 and it went out and went into the cooling thing. And that was what went in the plant. But that was all developed by GIs and civilians, but mostly. It was funny, one of the GIs were there, Don Breda. He was qualified as an engineer, but he didn't have a degree, but he was damn smart. And we didn't know. And when he got discharged, he comes in, not as a civilian, but in the Army uniform. He was a spy. I mean, he belonged to the watchdogs. But he was awfully good at it, and he did a lot of good stuff. But I know my father also, his company made one of those towers. I think they were made out of Manel.
What was your father's name?
Edwin B. Cole. He was, I guess, one of the most terrific engineers I ever knew, and I knew a lot of them. And as far as handwork and using his hands, he could do anything. You know, when I was a kid, and I had a little, and it busted. Well, he went and got a steel yard, and we had a coal furnace, an anthracite coal. He went in there and made it, and he went in there, banged one and made one, and I was back on. I mean, he could do anything.
A little bicycle for you?
Well, yeah. I had one bicycle and busted it up. My mother wouldn't let me fix it. So I went around on roller skates. I went any place in Brooklyn on roller skates. A roller skate cost 15 cents a roll. And I never had enough money. But if I had a dime or 15 cents, is I would go by the cigar store off Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. The cigar store that had a one-armed bandit. And I put in it, I'd always lose it. But every once in a while I'd hit it for a couple of dollars. Well, then I get a couple of dollars worth of wheels. And I wear a set of wheels out every month. I mean, I could go any place in Brooklyn I knew it. And when I got interested in airplane, I used to go out to Floyd Bennett Field. Before it was there, it was just the sand dunes. And they had some old aircraft there, biplanes, that taken people up. And then they built Floyd Bennett Field. I used to hitch down there. I could take the trolley car down at the end, and I'd get there, I'd go in, and then I sold tickets to for Jack Sarkey. He was a milkman during the night, and he would fly during the day, passengers. And every sixth ticket I sold, I could go up with him for a ride. But that was quite a place. I saw the entire United States Army Air Force land there. You know, the bombers and the fighters and so forth. It's a lot of time here. But my wife was, to me, one of the most fascinating persons with. She was only 19 when I got married. She was an excellent fisherman, a terrific baker. I got tapes of her showing how she made coffee rings and stuff. But she was all our names are down here, you know. You know where that place is down here?
In the walk, the Secret City walk?
Her name is there.
You said her name was Dolores?
Dolores. Yeah.
Well,
She had lived almost in poverty in the place that I went. Enid, Oklahoma was such a poor town to have an airfield. You know, it was an oil town. And so she was appreciative of everything she got. That's what was nice.